This morning, the United States went to war, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Major combat operations, bombs dropping on Tehran, Iran retaliating against American military bases across the Middle East, American lives potentially at risk. And here's the constitutional question nobody is stopping to ask between the breaking news alerts. Who authorized this? Not who supports it, not whether Iran deserved it, not whether the strike was justified strategically or morally. Who authorized this? Because that question, that specific constitutional question, is the most important thing happening in America today. And it connects directly to something the Supreme Court said 8 days ago that everyone seems to have already forgotten. This is the third voice. Stay with me. Let's establish the fact before we go anywhere else. This morning, President Trump announced that the United States military had begun what's called major combat operations in Iran, a joint operation with Israel. Strikes on Tehran and cities across Iran, targeting missile infrastructure, nuclear sites, and according to reports, Iranian leadership itself. Iran retaliated immediately. Missiles launched toward Israel, strikes against American military base in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters hit. Explosions heard as far as Dubai and Riyadh. This is not a limited strike. This is not a surgical operation. Trump himself called it massive and ongoing. He warned that American lives may be lost. He called it, in his own words, a war. And then he called the Iranian people to take over their government when it's finished. That's a regime change war announced. Where? On Truth Social. Without a declaration of war from Congress, without a specific authorization for use of military force, without asking the branch of government that the Constitution specifically designed to make exactly this decision. That's where we are this morning. Let's go to the Constitution first, because that's where your answer lives. Article 1, Section 8, the powers of Congress. The framers gave Congress, not the president, the power to declare war. This was not accident. It was a deliberate choice. They had just fought a revolution against a king who could send armies wherever he wanted without asking anyone. They were not going to recreate that in their new republic. James Madison wrote in 1798, and this is worth hearing clearly, the Constitution supposes what history of all government demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. Read that again. The framers knew presidents would want to go to war. That's precisely why they gave the power to declare it to someone else. The president is commander-in-chief. That is real power. He commands the military once war is authorized. But the decision to go to war, the decision to send Americans into combat and potentially to their death, that decision belongs to Congress, to the people's elected representatives, to the branch closest to the citizens who will pay for the war in blood and treasure. That's the design. That's the Constitution. Now, some of you are thinking presidents have been going to war without congressional declaration for decades. Korea, Vietnam, Libya, Syria, this isn't new. You're right. And that's part of the problem. But Congress recognized that problem 50 years ago in 1973 in the aftermath of Vietnam, after watching presidents commit American forces to a decade of combat without ever asking Congress to formally declare war. Congress passed the War Powers Resolution. It was passed over President Nixon's veto by a two-thirds majority in both chambers because Congress decided it had surrendered enough of its constitutional authority and it was time to take it back. Here's what the War Powers Resolution requires. The president must consult with Congress before introducing American forces into hostilities in every possible instance. After military action begins, the president must notify Congress within 48 hours. If Congress has not declared war or specifically authorized the use of force within 60 days, the president must withdraw American forces. That's the law, passed by Congress, signed into existence over a presidential veto, specifically designed for exactly this situation. This morning, a bipartisan group of lawmakers already responded. Republican Thomas Massey of Kentucky called the strikes acts of war and authorized by Congress. Democratic and Republican members have been working together on a War Powers Resolution specifically about Iran for weeks. Congress was planning votes on that resolution this very week before the bombs started falling. The question now is whether Congress will actually enforce what the Constitution and the law require, or whether it will do what it has done for decades: watch, complain, and ultimately step aside. Now, here is where this morning connects to 8 days ago in a way that should stop every American, regardless of political affiliation. 8 days ago, the Supreme Court ruled on the IEPA tariff case. 6 justices, including 2 Trump-appointed, told this president, you cannot use emergency powers to impose tariffs without clear congressional authorization. The word regulate does not mean tax, and when Congress delegates major economic powers, it uses specific language with specific limits. You went beyond what Congress authorized. That is unconstitutional. The principle the court applied was precise and important. In matters of major national significance, especially matters that touch on core congressional powers, the president needs clear authorization from Congress, not implied authorization, not emergency powers stretched beyond their statutory language. Clear, specific authorization. Now, apply that same principle to this morning. The power to tax, the power to declare war, both Article 1 congressional powers. Both are specifically enumerated in the Constitution as belonging to the people's representatives. Both are among the most consequential powers in our constitutional system. The Supreme Court just said 8 days ago, when you want to exercise a core congressional power, you need Congress to clearly authorize. This morning, the same president launched a war, his own words, against a sovereign nation, targeting its leadership, calling for regime change, warning of American casualties. Raise the congressional authorization. Not implied, not assumed, not drawn from emergency power language written for a different purpose. Where is the clear specific authorization that the Supreme Court just said is constitutionally required for exercises of major national power? If the Constitution requires congressional authorization to impose a tariff, and 6 justices just said it does, what does it require before a president sends Americans to die? Now, I need to be honest with you in the way this channel always tries to be honest. This is not uniquely a Trump problem. Obama launched military strike in Libya without congressional authorization. Syria, Yemen. His administration argued the War Powers Resolution didn't apply. Clinton ordered strikes in Kosovo, Haiti, Sudan. Every president in modern history has pushed the boundaries of the war power, and every Congress has largely let them, sometimes objecting loudly, rarely acting meaningfully. Why? Because going to war is politically easier for a president when Congress doesn't have to vote. Members of Congress can support the war if it succeeds and criticize it if it fails without ever having to cast a recorded vote that their constituents can hold them accountable for. That's not a constitutional system. That's a political escape hatch. And the American people pay the price every time, in lives, in treasure, in moral authority around the world. In the erosion of a constitutional framework that was specifically designed to make war harder to start and easier to end. James Madison knew what he was doing when he split the war power between the branch most prone to war and the branch most accountable to the people who fight. Congress has been doing that design for 60 years, one presidential strike at a time. But here's what makes this morning different from those precedents, and I want to be precise about this. This is not a single target. This is not a limited strike on a single target. This is not a response to an imminent attack on American forces or American soil. This is a declare, by the president's own words, massive and ongoing military campaign with the explicit goal of regime change in a sovereign nation. Iran did not attack the United States this morning. The United States attacked Iran. Trump's own intelligence director testified recently that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. The Oman foreign minister, who has been mediating talks between the US and Iran, said just hours before the strikes that the two sides had made significant progress toward a deal. The strikes began while diplomacy was still active, while Congress was preparing to vote on authorizing or limiting military action, before the American people had any public debate about whether this war is in their interest. The Constitution requires that the most consequential decision a government can make, the decision to go to war, be made by the branch most accountable to the people it affects. That didn't happen this morning. The War Powers Resolution gives Congress a 60-day clock. The president has 48 hours to formally notify Congress of the strikes. Once that notification is filed, the clock starts. Congress has 60 days to authorize continued military action, or the president must withdraw forces. That clock is now running. Congress has the choice, the same choice it has made repeatedly for decades. It can assert its constitutional authority, vote on the War Powers Resolution already introduced, bipartisan coalition, demand that the president make his case to the people's representatives before committing American lives to a regime change war of indeterminate length and scope. Or he can do what he has done before, divide along partisan lines, Republicans rallying behind their president, Democrats opposing him, the constitutional question swallowed by the political one, and the war powers of Congress eroding a little further. The Constitution didn't give Congress war powers so that Congress could delegate them to whoever is president. It gave Congress war powers because the framers understood something that remains true today. Presidents are most interested in war and most prone to it. And someone has to answer to the people who pay for it. I want to end not with a conclusion, but with a question, because that's what this channel does. It gives you the tools to think, not the answers to accept. Here's a question. 8 days ago, 6 justices of the Supreme Court, including 2 appointed by this president, told him that he cannot exercise a core congressional power without clear authorization from Congress. They apply that principle to tariffs, a significant economic decision, but one that does not cost human lives. This morning, the same president launched a war, a decision that by his own acknowledgement may cost American lives. A decision affecting not just our economy, but our standing in the world, our relationships with allies, the stability of an entire region, the safety of American service members and their families. If the Constitution requires congressional authorization to impose a tariff, what does it require before we go to war? And if Congress fails to assert its authority now, if it watches this war begin without demanding its constitutional role, what does that tell us about actually governing this country? Not the president alone, not Congress alone, but the relationship between them, and whether the Constitution design that has protected American self-governance for nearly 2.5 centuries is still functioning. These are not partisan questions. A Republican who believes in limited government and constitutional order should be asking them. A Democrat who believes in democratic accountability and the rule of law should be asking them. An independent who is exhausted by the partisan warfare but still believes in the Constitution should be asking them, whose America goes to war this morning? The president's or ours? The Constitution has an answer. Whether anyone in Washington is listening is a question we all need to be watching. This is a third voice. These are the questions worth asking, and I'll keep asking them as long as they need to be asked.